Grand Rising, guys. All praise be to the Most High. So something that's been on my mind recently has been being selective with their energy, right? And when I sit back and I reflect, over the last 38 years, I've always had some pretty good cutoff game. Um, for multiple reasons. Well, but cutoff game can look like so many different things too. Cutoff game could look like the the understanding that when God removes some people from your life, that was for a reason, and they're not meant to come back, right? And so when God removes them, it's that release. You release it to the universe. You release them with love and light, but with the side of do not fucking return. And but my cutoff game. Well, so you know what I'm being reminded of. So I used to, back when I was selling drugs in like my early 20s, right? Um, we used to have multiple SIM cards. We used to have like lots of SIM cards. Well, back then you used to be able to buy them for like $5 a piece, and then you would just pop the back of your phone off, put a new one in. You'd have a new number just like that. And so we had multiple different ones, and we were constantly changing our numbers. But the way that we operated back then was, if you're working with us, you're gonna have that number. You're gonna have one of them. You know what I mean? You're gonna be able to get in touch with us. It doesn't matter if you know what I mean. We didn't have to tell each other that we were switching our numbers up. But like if you know, you know, and if you don't know, you weren't supposed to know. But that's how we should be treating it. If you don't know, I mean, the ones that are important, you should be keeping them in. But some people, whether it be just for a season 22 when I said that, a season of your life, sometimes you need to just be straight up secluded. You need to cut everyone off. But I always had, it was always like the understanding of like, um, if it was meant to be, then it's gonna be. In the sense of, if we're gonna realign, just you not having this number is not gonna change it. If it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen, right? But it was also the understanding of not all money is good money. It was the understanding of, sometimes I took the opportunity of changing my phone number up. Like that was a blessing too. So sometimes I changed my number up so often, right? It was really easy just to lose the people I wasn't supposed to be aligned with. Well, I'm not aligned. I wasn't aligned with them. That's why they needed to go. But it's a lot easier just to cut that cord if just energetically it's just remove any form for them to get back to you. And so trying to catch up with me like for phone numbers was good luck. Good luck. You know, good by trying to catch up with me in general. Good luck. You're only catching up with me if I'm choosing to align with you. But that's a very important thing. Who we choose to align with. Who we choose to align with. Because sometimes when we choose to align with the wrong people, it's going to leave us hopeless. It's going to leave us hopeless because they're going to be bringing us down into their own battles because we all have our own demons. We all have our own demons, right? And no one can fight our demons but us. Nobody. You know, you can teach someone how to fight. You can give them the sword, but you can't fight the battle for them. They have to fight it themselves. We have to fight our own. We have to slay our own demons. We have to slay our own demons. And when you're surrounding yourself with people that are just not optimistic at all. It's always the glass is half empty. When you keep surrounding yourself with people like that, well, what hope do you have? It's really like good luck finding that extra optimism that you need to get over this level, to get over this hurdle, to get over it. Good luck trying to get that with the people that you're surrounding with yourself with. If you're surrounding yourself with people of lower vibration, and it's nothing to they're good people, but you know what? If it doesn't matter how good of a person you are, if you're refusing to fight your battles, then you're just an open vessel, you know. And regardless if you mean to be or not, but our fight is not with the flesh; it's with the principalities. It's not with the person. It's yep. it's what they open themselves up into, what they open themselves up to. That's why it's very important to treat your body like the temple it is. But if you treat your body like the temple it is, how could you possibly surround yourself with people that aren't? That's not very wise. That's not a healthy choice, is it? You know, it's not healthy. A lot of people, well, it's a suppression of emotions and stuff that a lot of people can't get over. It's suppression of emotions. But suppressing them doesn't get you anywhere. Suppressing your emotions, you know, like I was telling someone the other day, suppressing your emotions, six even. You have to sit in your emotions. You have to feel your emotions. You can't just dip your toes in. You can't dip your toes in and be like, all right, I felt a little bit. That sucked. All right, it's over. It's No. You have to embrace it. You have to feel it. You have to embody it. You have to embody the emotions. You have to fully release it. And but a lot of people, they just dip their toes in and they bottle it back up. They bottle it up. But sometimes it takes dipping your toes in multiple times before you can fully release it. Sometimes you have to readdress it. You have to cry multiple times before you get that final release. But the caution of a lot of people, they dip their toes in and they think they jumped all the way in. They dip their toes in and they think, all right, it's done. It's not done. It's not done. But that's a lesson that we learn every time I resurface. It's like, why is that back? I thought that was gone. I thought I dealt with that. It's like, no, no, clearly not. It's gonna keep resurfacing until we deal with it. Everything, we're bound to repeat the lessons until we pass them. It's as simple as that. We're bound to repeat the lessons until we pass them. We're bound to repeat them. How did that card even get in there? We're bound to repeat the lessons until we teach them. We're bound to repeat the lessons until we learn them. Once we learn the lessons, it's new levels. But wait, there's more. We move on. We move on to new levels. But with new levels come new trials, new tribulations, you know what I mean? New challenges. But it also comes with new skills. You know what I mean? It comes with new tools that we can put in our tool belt to use later on when it benefits us. But we can't gain that. We don't gain that as a tool to help us until we've mastered it. But to master things, to master the lessons. So a lot of the lessons, the emotions are suppressed. And so we can't fully learn the lesson until we get over the emotional part of it. But that's where a lot of it gets stuck on, because it's the emotional part of it. The emotional part of it sucks. The emotional part of it sucks. Hangman in reverse. No, it's not in reverse either. Okay, so it's supposed to come out that. Refusing to consider another point of view. Aloof. Playing the martyr. Stagnant. We become stagnant. We stay stagnant. When we bottle our emotions back up, when we bottle them back up, when we just dip our toes in and bottle emotions back up and don't fully release it to the universe, that's all we're doing. We're just, well, that's a continual cycle of playing the victim. A lot of times, but it's true. A lot of times, people just want to stay playing the victim. Not to say that you're not. Wow, it's a beautiful bird. I don't know what it is. It's all black. It's got red, orangish reddish wing on its like shoulders. That's it. It's all black. Refusing to consider another's point of view. You know how that ties into with bottling up emotions is a lot of times we may feel as though we might feel justified for feeling the way we feel. And, sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. But a lot of times we're acting out of our emotions. We're acting out of our emotions. And, you know, but that's why it's so important to be a commander of your mind, because your mind's a battlefield. You can either be its commander or be its soldiers. 11 on the dot. And soldiers, soldiers take orders. Commanders, they give orders. Commanders aren't, they act logically, they act rationally. They don't act out of emotions. They don't just act out of emotions. 8 of Wands in reverse. They don't act out of emotions. When you're acting out of emotions, you're acting aimlessly. You're acting. It's reckless. It's aimless. In the sense of your overall purpose, your overall goal, because your overall. Where's he even going with that? Your overall goal is to learn the lesson, but you can't learn the lesson if we're refusing to address the emotions. Kind of lost that channel when I was focusing on that bird. But you know what? It doesn't. The Wheel of Fortune. When we stop suppressing our emotions, when we stop bottling up, when we stop dipping our toes in the water of our emotions, and we fully jump into them, and we fully feel them, we fully sit in the shittiness of them, because normally it sucks. No, not normally, always it's not fun, and that's why people don't do it, because it's not fun. But that's why more people need to do it, because it's needed. But just like everything else, just like Western medicine and everything else, we just want to treat the symptoms and not the problem. We want to treat the symptoms and not get to the root of the problem. The Lover's in reverse. When we treat the symptoms, we're just making poor choices. That are gonna leave us imbalanced, mismatched, not accepting responsibility for your decisions. I can't show this card, but shifting the blame, shifting the blame, which is what a lot of people do with their emotions. It's a lot easier for us to shift the blame onto someone else. It's a lot easier for us to point the finger and say it was them. That what they did. Force. Yes, people's actions can cause a reaction from us, but overall, no. It's the understanding that you have control. You have full control, and you have control when you allow people to anger you that much. You have control when you allow people to act emotionally and not logically, to act not rationally. But that comes from being a soldier. That comes from not being a commander of your mind, which is the first thing I teach is you have to be a commander of your mind. Because if you're not a commander of your mind, you already lost the battle. You already lost it. But becoming a commander of your mind comes from nurturing all aspects of you. It comes from nurturing the parts of you that you've bottled up and you've been hiding your whole life because maybe society taught you to, maybe religion taught you to, maybe your parents taught you to, or maybe all those people, places, things, maybe they all taught you how you're supposed to feel. But fuck what people tell you how you're supposed to feel. How do you feel? People can tell you what they want all you want, but maybe that's why you've never healed from it, because you're sitting there focusing on what other people are telling you you're supposed to feel about it. Well, how do you actually feel about it? Are you taking time to nurture yourself? Are you taking time to to even question how you really feel about situations? Next time the emotions come up that you've been bottling up, ask yourself that. Sometimes it's as simple just granting yourself permission to feel the way you feel. Sometimes it's as simple as that, just granting yourself permission to feel the pain, to feel the sorrow, to feel whatever it is, to feel the anger. Sometimes you need to justify it. You need to nurture yourself, nurture your inner child wounds. Nurture your inner child wounds. Where else do I want to go with that? Cutting people off. That's what we're talking about. Cutting people off. Well, cutting people off, sometimes it's the responsible thing to do. Emperors know who to cut off and when to cut off. Emperors know that not everyone is, meant to be in your life. And it's hard to realize that because, a lot of times we have to cut people off that we do care about, but it's not because we stopped caring about them. It's the understanding that if you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not growing, you're dying. And if you're just bringing shade to my sunlight, if you're just dimming my light with your negativity, with your low vibrational choices, because we all have choices, but we're all responsible for the choices that we make. And are you gonna be are you gonna be Are you going to be held back because of other people's inability to change, because of other people's inability to grow, because of other people's inability to let go and release the things that they need to? Are you going to hold yourself back from that? Or are you going to become the emperor that you are? Are you going to become the commander of your mind that you are? You never find yourself in a position of power if you keep allowing yourself to be surrounded by weak people. But the sad reality is, a lot of the people we surround ourselves with are the people that we care about, and a lot of the people we care about can be weak. But there's a difference between people that are trying to be better, and there's a difference between people that have no intention of being better. Stagnancy. Are you being stagnant, or are you trying to grow? Are you trying to improve your life? Because if you're not even trying, if you're not even attempting, then you're a waste of my time. As simple as that. But that's out of a place of love. Well, one, it's out of a place of love for myself, but it's a place out of love for you too, because maybe you can knock some sense into you. Like, hey, maybe you should reevaluate your decisions. Because at the end of the day, we're not responsible for anyone else other than ourselves. We're not responsible for anyone else other than ourselves. There's a cardinal too. We're not responsible for anyone else other than ourselves, but we have to set our boundaries and we have to stand our ground. We have to defend and protect our stance, which is our energy, which is our morals, which is our standards, which are our standards, because our standards can cover everything. But what are our standards? Where are we setting the bar? If we're setting the bar up here, but we keep letting people in that can't even pass this bar, where do we think our bar is? It's not still up here. But I mean, you might, as much as you can try to keep the bar still up there, it's just going to be lowered. But you are the company you surround yourself with. You are the company you surround yourself with. "2020. You are the company you surround yourself with. You are the company you surround yourself with. You are the company you surround yourself with. Blessed sight. But just as when we start treating ourselves as a temple, as we're meant to be, as we start treating our body like the temple is meant to be, we strengthen our connection with the Most High, with Source, Creator, and we raise our frequency, we raise our vibration. And when you raise your vibration, you naturally push away the things that no longer resonate the same frequency, and naturally you attract the things that are. And you're going to attract other people that have the same visions, that have the same sight, that have the same goals, that are just aligned with you, because that's just how things work. But you're not going to find the ones that align with you if you keep surrounding yourself with the ones that aren't. And so everything comes back full circle. Your cutoff game. Your cutoff game. Who you surround yourself. You are the company you keep. And so we all need to spend more time. Well, so much can be found in our like in our time of aloneness, when we just sit here with ourselves in nature, when we find the time to ground, when we find the time to connect to Source, that's when we find out who we really are. That's where we find everything. That's where we find everything. But you have to silence the chaos of everything around you. Everything around you. But you're never gonna cut off. You're never gonna find the peace. You're never going to find what you're truly seeking if you keep surrounding yourself with those type of people. But those are choices. Those are decisions that you're making. And you have to be conscious of that. You have to be aware of that, because, we're all accountable. We're all accountable. One thing, too, is, so it's always been easy for me to cut people off. And one thing I had to learn is, one good thing I can find to give thanks for having to deal with my son's mother is I learned how to co-parent. I learned how you can deal with someone that it's not very easy to deal with, not very fun to deal with, pretty miserable to deal with. But it's not about them. It was about the child. But everything stayed strictly about my son. And I didn't hit her up and ask her how her day's going, because I didn't care. As long as I didn't wish any ill upon her, or released her with all the love and light, but still with the dash of do not fucking return. And but I would never wish ill upon her, and because wishing ill upon them would be wishing ill situation upon my son, and that's not something I would ever want. But I had to be able to be kosher with her. And that was a almost impossible thing. Almost impossible thing. Heart healing. Over time, our perspective changes on things, such as well, for this, as soon as you break up out of the relationship or whatever, it's going to be anger and this and that, and resentment towards the other person, right? But over time, as your heart heals, you realize that it's not about you. It's not about your relationship. It's about the child and what's best for the child. But but a lot of our growth comes from healing. A lot of our growth comes from healing. But we can't heal. We can't heal from situations that we refuse to cut those people off. We can't. We can't heal from it if because the wound has never had the chance to heal because it's constantly being reopened. It's constantly being reopened. But constantly being reopened, constantly dipping your toes in the water, constantly. How many times can the same person come in and represent the same situation, the same scenario that you know exactly how it's going to play out because it's happened 100 times, or they're just that predictable. In which case, you know the outcome. A lot of times we lie to ourselves because we want to think better of the other person. We want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, no, maybe they said they changed, maybe they did. But proof is always in the pudding. People talk a lot, but people do less. But the less they do speaks a lot louder. Speaks a lot louder. It speaks a lot louder. Communication. We don't just always resort right to cutting people off. Unless it's really extreme. We always try to work things out, diplomatically, peacefully. We always try to work things out that way. But when it's not possible, we try to communicate our needs. We try to communicate our wants. We try to communicate, just the things that are affecting us. But if people refuse to do that, if people refuse to, one, even acknowledge it as an issue, or two, to do anything about it, well, they've already told us what we need to know. They already told us it's time to cut them off. They've already told us. Are we going to listen? Or do we want to keep repeating our lesson? Did we learn it this time? Are we going to learn and finally cut the cords? Or do we want to learn it again? Choices, choices, choices.